The sound of clattering dishes mixed with the low hum of conversation as Marcus Thompson wiped down another table in the Naval Base mess hall. Steam rose from the industrial dishwashers behind him, and the familiar smell of cafeteria food hung heavy in the air. At 22, Marcus had been working this job for 8 months, ever since his discharge from basic training due to a knee injury that never quite healed right. The limp wasn't severe, but it was enough to keep him from the combat role he'd dreamed of since childhood. Marcus moved methodically between tables, collecting trays and wiping surfaces with practiced efficiency. His supervisor, Betty Morrison, a stern woman in her 50s who'd been running the mess hall for over a decade, appreciated his work ethic. Unlike some of the other civilian employees, Marcus never complained, never showed up late, and never caused trouble. But Betty noticed something else about the young man: the way his eyes would track movement across the room, how he'd position himself to keep the exits in view, and the way he'd pause when groups of Navy SEALs came in for their meals. The SEALs were a different breed entirely. They moved with a confidence and purpose that set them apart from other personnel on base. Marcus had watched them countless times, studying their posture, their awareness, the way they communicated with subtle gestures and knowing glances. They represented everything he'd wanted to become before his injury derailed those plans. On this particular Tuesday morning, the mess hall was busier than usual. A training exercise had just concluded, and hungry sailors filled every available seat. Marcus worked his way through the crowded space, balancing multiple trays on his arms with surprising grace for someone with his injury. Near the back corner, a table of SEALs sat discussing their recent exercise. Their voices were low, but Marcus caught fragments of their conversation about marksmanship scores and tactical positioning. Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan, a 15-year veteran with sun-weathered skin and sharp green eyes, led the group. He was known throughout the base for his exceptional shooting skills and his ability to spot talent in unexpected places. Sullivan had been watching Marcus for weeks, noting the young man's movement patterns and observational skills. There was something about the mess hall worker that reminded him of himself at that age: a hunger for something more, combined with natural instincts that couldn't be taught. As Marcus approached their table to clear empty plates, one of the younger SEALs, Petty Officer Rodriguez, was bragging about his performance on the shooting range that morning. He'd scored 93 out of 100, which was impressive for someone with only 2 years of experience. "Not bad, Rodriguez," Sullivan said, sipping his coffee. "But I remember when I thought 93 was worth celebrating. Wait until you've been doing this for a decade." Marcus couldn't help but listen as he worked. The conversation shifted to different shooting techniques, the importance of breath control, and the mental aspects of precision shooting. As he reached for Rodriguez's tray, his hand accidentally bumped a salt shaker, sending it rolling across the table. "Sorry about that," Marcus said quickly, reaching to catch the rolling shaker. In one smooth motion, he snatched it from the air without looking directly at it, his reflexes sharp and precise. Sullivan's eyebrows raised slightly. "Nice catch." Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks. "Just reflexes, I guess." "You guess?" Sullivan leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus more carefully. "You ever done any shooting?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Marcus shifted his weight, favoring his good leg slightly. "Some hunting with my dad when I was younger." "Nothing special." Rodriguez laughed. "Hunting rabbits is a little different from what we do." Sullivan held up a hand to quiet Rodriguez, his attention still focused on Marcus. "What kind of hunting?" Marcus hesitated, unsure why this Navy SEAL was showing interest in his background. "Mostly deer. Some small game. My dad taught me to shoot when I was 8. What was your longest shot?" The question was direct, professional. Marcus realized this wasn't casual conversation anymore. 400 yards. Buck deer. One shot. The table fell silent. Rodriguez stopped mid-bite of his sandwich. 400 yards was a respectable distance for a hunting shot, especially for someone with no formal training. "What rifle?" Sullivan asked. "Remington 700. 30-06 iron sights." Sullivan's expression shifted from casual interest to genuine attention. Iron sights at 400 yards required exceptional skill and natural ability. Most hunters wouldn't attempt such a shot, and fewer still would make it cleanly.
Iron sights, Sullivan repeated. No scope? Marcus nodded.
Dad said scopes were crutches. Said if you couldn't hit it with iron sights, you didn't deserve to hit it at all.
Petty Officer Chen, the team's designated marksman, whistled softly.
That's old school.
My grandfather used to say the same thing.
Sullivan stood up, his decision made.
Marcus, right? That's your name?
Yes, sir.
You got a few minutes after your shift ends?
Marcus glanced around the mess hall, then back at Sullivan.
I guess so. Why? I want to show you something. Meet me at the range at 1400 hours.
With that, Sullivan gathered his team and left, leaving Marcus standing there with a bus tub full of dirty dishes and a head full of questions. Betty Morrison appeared at his elbow, having witnessed the entire exchange.
What was that about? She asked.
Marcus shook his head.
I honestly don't know.
The rest of Marcus's shift passed in a blur. He went through the motions of cleaning and serving, but his mind kept returning to the conversation with Sullivan.
Navy SEALs didn't just invite random mess hall workers to the shooting range. There had to be more to it.
At exactly 1400 hours, Marcus found himself standing outside the base firing range, still wearing his work uniform and smelling faintly of dishwater and industrial cleaner. He'd changed out of his non-slip work shoes into a pair of worn sneakers, the only other footwear he owned.
Sullivan emerged from the range building carrying a rifle case. Right on time. I like punctuality.
Sir, I should probably mention that I haven't shot in over 2 years.
Not since before I enlisted.
Sullivan set down the case and looked at Marcus directly. Why'd you enlist? The question was personal, but something about Sullivan's manner made Marcus want to answer honestly.
Wanted to serve. Wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. Wanted to be a SEAL, actually. What happened? Marcus gestured toward his left leg. Knee injury in basic. Nothing dramatic.
Just never healed quite right.
Medical discharge. Sullivan nodded understanding.
He'd seen countless young men and women derailed by injuries, some minor, some severe, all devastating to their dreams.
That why you're working in the mess hall? Need the job. Besides, I figure being around the Navy is better than not being around it at all. Sullivan appreciated the honesty. Fair enough. Let's see what you can do.
The shooting range was empty except for a range safety officer who nodded at Sullivan and returned to his paperwork. Sullivan led Marcus to lane 7, midway down the line of shooting positions. He opened the rifle case to reveal a standard military M4 carbine.
You familiar with this platform?
Marcus examined the weapon without touching it. Basic training covered it, but I didn't get much range time before my discharge. Sullivan handed him the rifle.
Basic safety rules? Treat every weapon as if it's loaded. Never point the muzzle at anything you don't intend to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger until ready to shoot. Be sure of your target and what's beyond it. Good.
The fundamentals are the same regardless of the weapon. Sullivan set up a target at 100 yards, a standard silhouette with scoring rings.
Let's start here and see how you do.
Marcus accepted a magazine with 20 rounds and inserted it into the rifle. The weapon felt familiar in his hands despite the time that had passed since basic training. He adopted a prone position, adjusting the stock and checking his sight alignment.
Take your time, Sullivan said. No pressure. But Marcus felt pressure.
This was his chance to prove that his injury hadn't stolen everything from him, that he still had something to offer.
He controlled his breathing, finding the natural pause between heartbeats. The target seemed to sharpen in his vision as everything else faded to background noise.
The first shot surprised him with its recoil, different from the hunting rifles he was accustomed to. The bullet struck the target, but low and to the left. Marcus made a mental adjustment for the weapon's characteristics and fired again. This shot was closer to center. Sullivan watched without comment as Marcus worked through the magazine. Each shot was better than the last as the young man adapted to the rifle's behavior. By the 15th round, Marcus was consistently hitting the center ring. His final 5 shots created a tight group that would have been respectable for any marksman. "Not bad for being out of practice," Sullivan said as they walked to examine the target. Marcus studied his shot group with a critical eye. "Could be better. Could be worse, too. Most people take weeks to achieve this level of consistency." Sullivan pointed to the tight cluster of holes in the target's center. "You've got natural ability. Question is, what do you want to do with it?" Marcus looked at the SEAL instructor, unsure how to answer. His knee injury had closed the door on his military career, or so he thought. "I'm not sure I understand." Sullivan folded the target and handed it to Marcus. "There's more than one way to serve your country. Combat roles aren't the only way to contribute." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you come back tomorrow. Same time. We'll try some longer distances, different scenarios. See what you're really capable of." Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since his medical discharge: hope. "You really think I have potential?" Sullivan's smile was slight but genuine. "Son, I've been training shooters for 15 years. Natural talent is rare. What you just did. Most people can't achieve that with months of training." As they walked back toward the base, Sullivan continued, "There are opportunities for civilians in support roles. Instructors, consultants, competition shooters who work with military programs. Your injury doesn't have to be the end of your story." Marcus listened intently, feeling possibilities opening up that he'd never considered. The mess hall job had been a way to stay connected to military life, but this conversation suggested there might be a path back to the world he thought was lost to him. "I'll be here tomorrow," Marcus said. "Good. And, Marcus?" "Yes, sir?" "Don't sell yourself short. What happened in there wasn't just luck or remembered skills. You've got something special." That evening, Marcus returned to his small apartment off base with the target folded carefully in his pocket. He'd shot well, better than he'd expected after such a long break. But, more importantly, he'd caught the attention of someone who understood what that meant. He called his father that night, something he hadn't done in weeks. "Dad? It's Marcus. Marcus. Good to hear from you, son. How's the job treating you?" Marcus looked at the target spread out on his kitchen table. "Actually, Dad, something interesting happened today. Remember those shooting lessons you gave me when I was a kid?" His father chuckled. "Of course. You were a natural. Why? I think those lessons might be more important than either of us realized." As Marcus recounted the day's events, he felt something shift inside him. The injury that had ended his dreams of becoming a SEAL might not be the conclusion to his story after all. It might just be the beginning of a different chapter, one that was about to unfold in ways he never could have imagined. Outside his window, the lights of the naval base twinkled in the darkness, and, for the first time in months, Marcus fell asleep looking forward to tomorrow. The next afternoon found Marcus standing at the firing range 30 minutes early, unable to contain his anticipation. He'd barely slept the night before, replaying every moment of his conversation with Lieutenant Commander Sullivan and wondering what today might bring. The morning shift at the mess hall had dragged endlessly, with Betty Morrison commenting twice on his distracted state. Sullivan arrived precisely at 1400 hours, this time accompanied by Petty Officer Chen. The team's designated marksman Marcus had met the day before. Chen carried a different rifle case, longer and more substantial than the M4 from their previous session. Punctual again, Sullivan noted approvingly. Chen wanted to observe today's session. "Hope you don't mind an audience." Marcus shook his head, though he felt a flutter of nerves. "No problem, sir." Chen extended his hand. "Good to see you again, Marcus. Jake told me about yesterday's performance. Impressive for someone out of practice." "Thank you, sir." Sullivan led them to a different section of the range, where targets were positioned at various distances extending out to 600 yards. The setup was more complex than the previous day, with wind flags positioned at intervals and a spotting scope mounted on a tripod. "Today we're going to test your abilities under more challenging conditions," Sullivan explained, opening the rifle case to reveal a precision bolt-action rifle with an advanced scope.
This is a Remington M24.
Similar platform to your father's hunting rifle, but with some modern improvements. Marcus examined the weapon with obvious appreciation. The craftsmanship was exceptional, and the scope was far more sophisticated than anything he'd used before.
The scope takes some getting used to, Chen added.
But Jake wants to see how you adapt to new equipment. Sullivan positioned a target at 200 yards. "Let's start here and work our way out. The scope is already zeroed, so any adjustments you make should be minimal."
Marcus settled into a prone position, adjusting the rifle's bipod and finding his comfortable shooting stance.
Through the scope, the target appeared dramatically closer and clearer than with iron sights. He spent several minutes familiarizing himself with the reticle and learning the scope's features. "Take a few practice shots to get comfortable," Sullivan instructed.
"No rush."
Marcus's first shot through the scope struck the target dead center, surprising all three men. He'd instinctively compensated for the scope's magnification and the rifle's different characteristics.
"Lucky shot?" Chen asked quietly. Sullivan didn't respond, watching intently as Marcus fired 4 more rounds in rapid succession.
Each bullet found the center ring, creating a tight group that would have been impressive for an experienced sniper.
"Move the target to 300 yards, Sullivan said to Chen.
At 300 yards, Marcus's performance remained consistent. He seemed to have an intuitive understanding of bullet drop and wind compensation, making micro-adjustments that spoke to natural talent rather than learned skills.
400 yards, Sullivan called out.
This was the distance Marcus had mentioned from his hunting experience. With iron sights on a hunting rifle, he'd made a clean shot at this range. Now, with a precision weapon and scope, he should theoretically perform even better. Marcus studied the target through the scope, noting the wind flags and calculating the necessary adjustments. His father's voice echoed in his memory, "The rifle's just a tool, son. Your mind does the real work." The shot broke cleanly, and Chen announced the hit through his spotting scope.
"Dead center."
"That's a kill shot." 500 yards, Sullivan said, his voice betraying no emotion.
At 500 yards, the challenges multiplied.
Wind became a significant factor, and the slightest error in calculation could send the bullet wide of the target. Marcus had never attempted a shot at this distance, even during his hunting days. He spent more time studying the conditions, watching the wind flags and feeling the air movement on his face.
The mathematics of long-range shooting weren't complex, but they required precise application.
Too many variables existed for guesswork. His first shot at 500 yards missed the target entirely, striking the dirt berm behind it.
Marcus didn't show frustration, instead treating it as valuable data.
He made adjustments to his point of aim and fired again.
The second shot hit the target's outer ring.
Better, but still not the precision he demonstrated at closer distances. "Wind's tricky at this distance," Chen observed. "Takes most people months to learn to read it consistently."
Marcus nodded, absorbing the feedback.
His third shot struck closer to center, and his fourth was nearly perfect. By his fifth attempt, he was consistently hitting the target's vital zone.
600 yards, Sullivan announced.
This distance pushed beyond Marcus's experience entirely. The target was barely visible as more than a speck, even through the powerful scope. At 600 yards, factors like temperature, humidity, and even the Earth's rotation could affect bullet flight.
Marcus spent long minutes studying the conditions before taking his first shot.
The bullet struck low and to the right, missing the target completely. He made corrections and tried again, this time hitting the target but outside the scoring rings. "Don't force it," Sullivan advised. "At this distance, patience matters more than anything else." Marcus forced himself to slow down, treating each shot as an individual problem to solve rather than part of a series. His shooting improved incrementally, and, by his final shot, he managed to hit the target's outer scoring ring. Not bad for a first attempt at 600, Chen said, lowering his spotting scope.
Most people can't even hit the target backing at this distance.
Sullivan remained quiet, processing what he'd witnessed. Marcus's performance showed clear natural ability combined with an analytical mind capable of rapid learning and adaptation. The young man's injury might have ended his dreams of becoming a SEAL, but it hadn't diminished his potential as a marksman.
How do you feel about today's session?
Sullivan asked as they packed up the equipment. Marcus considered the question carefully.
Challenging. I learned a lot about my limitations. What limitations?
Long-range shooting requires knowledge and experience I don't have yet. At 400 yards and in, I can rely on instinct and basic skills. Beyond that, I need to understand the science better. Sullivan and Chen exchanged glances. The answer demonstrated both humility and insight, qualities essential for advanced marksmanship training.
Would you be interested in learning that science? Sullivan asked. Absolutely. What about your job at the mess hall? Marcus hadn't considered this complication.
Betty Morrison depended on him, and he needed the income.
I guess I'd have to work around my shifts. What if I told you there might be another option? Marcus looked at Sullivan with curiosity and growing hope. What kind of option?
Sullivan leaned against the rifle case. The Navy has programs for civilian instructors and consultants. People with specialized skills who can contribute without being active duty personnel.
Your injury wouldn't be a disqualifier for those positions. You mean I could actually work in marksmanship instruction? Potentially.
But you'd need formal training first.
Certification.
Proof that your abilities are consistent and teachable. Chen added, there's a civilian marksmanship program that works with military contractors. They're always looking for natural talent to develop into instructors. Marcus felt the same surge of hope he'd experienced the previous day, but stronger now. A path was opening that he'd never considered, one that could lead back to meaningful service despite his injury.
What would I need to do?
Sullivan pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to Marcus.
Call this number tomorrow morning. Ask for Sarah Martinez. Tell her I referred you and that you're interested in the civilian marksmanship instructor program.
Marcus read the card, Advanced Tactical Training Systems, Civilian Marksmanship Division.
It's a competitive program, Sullivan warned.
You'd be competing against former military snipers, police marksmen, competitive shooters with decades of experience.
But, you think I have a chance? Sullivan's smile was confident. Son, I've seen a lot of shooters in my career. What you did today, adapting to a new weapon system and reaching out to 600 yards on your second day? That's not normal. Most people train for months to achieve what you just did.
As they walked back toward the base, Chen shared more details about the civilian program. Successful candidates underwent 6 months of intensive training covering everything from ballistics and meteorology to teaching techniques and safety protocols. Graduates worked as instructors at military bases, training facilities, and law enforcement academies across the country. The pay is good, Chen mentioned. Better than most civilian jobs on base.
And you'd be training the next generation of military marksmen. Making a real contribution.
That evening, Marcus called his father again, this time with concrete news about potential opportunities. A civilian instructor program, his dad repeated.
That sounds perfect for you.
You always were good at explaining things to your younger cousins when we went hunting.
I'm nervous about the competition.
Sullivan said I'd be up against former snipers and professional shooters.
Son, remember what I always told you about shooting?
Marcus smiled, reciting the familiar words.
It's not about being perfect.
It's about being consistent and learning from every shot.
That's right. And you've always been a fast learner.
Besides, natural talent combined with determination beats experience without passion every time. After ending the call, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with Sarah Martinez's business card, planning what he'd say when he called in the morning. The conversation with Sullivan and Chen had revealed possibilities he'd never imagined. His military career might have ended before it truly began, but perhaps his service to his country was just taking a different form. He thought about his co-workers in the mess hall, many of whom had similar stories of dreams interrupted by circumstances beyond their control.
How many of them possessed untapped talents that could contribute to something larger?
Marcus realized his injury had led him to this opportunity, not despite his setbacks but because of them. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the mess hall early, wanting to complete his opening duties before making the phone call that could change his life. Betty Morrison noticed his energetic demeanor immediately. "You seem different lately," she observed.
"What's going on?" Marcus hesitated, unsure how much to share.
"I might have an opportunity to change careers.
Use some skills I didn't know were valuable." Betty raised an eyebrow. "Military related?"
"Sort of.
Civilian contractor work." "Teaching." "Teaching what?"
"Marksmanship."
Betty's expression shifted to surprise and, then, understanding. "Well, I'll be damned.
I knew there was more to you than dishwashing.
You've got that look about you, like you're meant for something specific." "What look?"
"Same look my late husband had.
He was a Marine sniper in Vietnam.
Never talked much about it, but he had this way of seeing everything at once."
"You've got that same awareness." Marcus felt touched by the comparison. "I hope I can live up to it."
"You will.
But don't forget us little people when you're training the next generation of warriors."
At his break, Marcus stepped outside and dialed Sarah Martinez's number with slightly trembling fingers. "Advanced Tactical Training Systems, Sarah Martinez speaking."
"Ms. Martinez, my name is Marcus Thompson. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan referred me to your civilian marksmanship instructor program."
There was a pause, then recognition in her voice.
"Sullivan mentioned you might call.
He spoke very highly of your potential."
"Are you interested in learning about our next selection process?"
"Yes, ma'am."
"Very interested." "Excellent. Our next assessment begins in 2 weeks.
I can email you the application and preparation materials."
"Fair warning, the process is demanding. We typically accept about 10% of applicants."
Marcus felt his pulse quicken.
"I understand. I'm ready for the challenge." "Good. I'll need your email address and some basic information." "And, Mr. Thompson?"
"Yes, ma'am?"
"Sullivan doesn't make recommendations lightly.
If he thinks you're worth our time, that carries significant weight here." As Marcus provided his information and listened to details about the selection process, he realized his life was about to change dramatically. The mess hall job that had been a temporary necessity was about to become a stepping stone to something far more meaningful. Standing outside the base, phone in hand, Marcus looked toward the shooting range where his journey had begun just 2 days earlier. In 48 hours, he'd gone from believing his military dreams were permanently ended to discovering a path that might lead to an even more significant contribution. His knees still ached on cold mornings, and the limp would always remind him of what he'd lost. But now those same challenges were pointing him toward what he might gain. Sometimes, Marcus realized, the end of one dream was just the beginning of another. 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself standing in front of the Advanced Tactical Training Systems facility in Virginia Beach, a sprawling complex of modern buildings surrounded by extensive shooting ranges. His hands were steady, but his heart raced as he watched other candidates arrive. Some carried custom rifle cases worth more than Marcus's annual salary, others wore clothing that screamed former military with every tactical pocket and subdued logo. The competition was intimidating. Marcus recognized the bearing of former Marines, the precise movements of ex-police snipers, and the confident swagger of competitive shooters who'd spent decades perfecting their craft. At 22, with only 2 weeks of preparation, he felt distinctly out of place among these seasoned professionals. Sarah Martinez greeted the 36 candidates in a sterile conference room lined with certificates and photographs of distinguished graduates. A former Army sniper herself, she commanded immediate respect with her direct manner and comprehensive knowledge of the program's demands. "Gentlemen and ladies," she began, scanning the assembled group, "you're here because someone believes you have potential as marksmanship instructors. Over the next 3 days, we'll test every aspect of that potential.
Only 10 to 12 of you will advance to the full training program."
She outlined the assessment phases: written examinations covering ballistics, meteorology, and safety protocols, practical shooting tests at distances from 100 to 1,000 yards, teaching demonstrations where candidates would instruct volunteers, psychological evaluations, and physical fitness requirements.
"This isn't just about shooting ability," Martinez emphasized.
"We're looking for people who can effectively transfer knowledge to others while maintaining the highest safety standards. Some of the best shooters I've known couldn't teach their grandmother to tie her shoes." Marcus took careful notes, aware that his preparation had been minimal compared to others in the room. While his competitors had spent years accumulating credentials and experience, he'd spent 2 weeks studying ballistics manuals and practicing at the base range whenever Sullivan could spare the time. The first day's written examination proved challenging but manageable. Marcus's natural analytical abilities and quick learning had served him well during his intensive preparation. The mathematics of ballistics felt intuitive once he understood the underlying principles, and his hunting background provided practical context for theoretical concepts. During lunch break, Marcus overheard conversations that revealed the depth of experience among his competition.
Former Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a sniper.
Dr. Patricia Hoffman held a PhD in physics and had spent 15 years as a competitive precision rifle shooter. Captain, retired, William Hayes had commanded a Marine Scout sniper platoon and written extensively on advanced marksmanship techniques.
"First time applying?" asked a voice beside Marcus.
He turned to see a woman about his age with short blonde hair and calloused hands that spoke of extensive trigger time.
Her name tag read Jennifer Walsh.
"Yes."
"You?"
"Third time. Made it to day 2 before, but washed out on the teaching demonstration." She studied Marcus with curious eyes.
"You seem nervous." "Terrified is more accurate." Jennifer laughed. "At least you're honest."
"Most of these guys are putting on the hard-ass act."
"Where's your background from?"
Marcus hesitated, knowing his story sounded unconvincing compared to others.
"Basic training, medical discharge, been working in a mess hall." Lieutenant Commander Sullivan discovered I had some natural ability. Jennifer's eyebrows rose.
"Jake Sullivan?
He's a legend. If he recommended you, that means something serious."
The afternoon practical shooting phase began with basic accuracy tests at 100 yards. Marcus watched as candidate after candidate demonstrated exceptional precision with various rifle platforms. When his turn came, he approached the firing line with the provided M24, the same model he'd trained with under Sullivan's guidance.
His first group measured 0.7 inches, well within the program's standards.
The range officer marked his score without comment, but Marcus noticed several other candidates glancing in his direction.
Tight groups from unknown candidates always drew attention in competitive environments.
At 200 yards, Marcus maintained his precision while some more experienced shooters began to struggle with the facility's crosswinds. His hunting background had taught him to read environmental conditions, a skill that proved valuable as distances increased. The 300-yard stage eliminated 6 candidates whose groups exceeded the maximum acceptable spread. Marcus continued performing consistently, his natural abilities complementing his limited formal training. At 400 yards, the distance of his longest hunting shot, Marcus felt completely comfortable. He fired a group that measured under 1 inch, earning grudging nods from nearby competitors and range officers. "Not bad for a mess hall worker," commented former Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, though his tone held more respect than mockery.
The 500-yard test proved more challenging.
Marcus had only practiced at this distance during his sessions with Sullivan, but his analytical approach served him well. He carefully observed conditions, made calculated adjustments, and fired methodically.
His group measured 1.3 inches, still well within acceptable parameters.
By day's end, 12 candidates had been eliminated based on shooting performance alone. Marcus remained in contention, though he knew the most difficult challenges lay ahead. That evening, he called Sullivan to report on his progress.
Sounds like you're holding your own, Sullivan said. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Nervous about the teaching demonstration. I've never formally instructed anyone. Remember what we discussed about breaking down complex tasks into simple components?
Teaching marksmanship is just helping someone understand the process you go through naturally.
What if I can't explain what comes instinctively to me?
Sullivan chuckled.
Son, that's exactly what good instructors learn to do.
They take their unconscious competence and make it conscious and transferable.
You've got the ability. Tomorrow you'll discover whether you can share it.
The second day began with 600-yard shooting, a distance that separated serious marksmen from weekend hobbyists. Environmental factors became critical at this range, and minor errors in technique or calculation resulted in complete misses. Marcus studied conditions carefully, noting wind speed and direction at multiple points downrange. His first shot struck the target's center ring, confirming his calculations. For subsequent shots created a group measuring 1.8 inches, exceptional performance for someone with minimal long-range experience. Dr. Hoffman, shooting beside him, glanced over with obvious surprise.
Impressive group. How long have you been shooting precision rifle?
About 3 weeks, Marcus answered honestly. Her expression shifted from surprise to disbelief.
3 weeks? That's not possible.
I've been hunting since childhood, but formal precision shooting is new to me. Dr. Hoffman studied her own target, or her group measured slightly larger than Marcus's despite decades of experience. Natural talent is a hell of a thing, she muttered.
The 800-yard test eliminated 8 more candidates.
Marcus had never attempted this distance, but he approached it with the same methodical analysis that had served him at shorter ranges. His first shot missed the target entirely, striking low. He made adjustments and tried again, this time hitting the outer ring. By his final shot, he was consistently hitting the vital zone. Jennifer Walsh struggled at 800 yards, her groups opening significantly compared to her earlier performance. Marcus watched her grow increasingly frustrated as shots strayed from her point of aim. "Relax," he said quietly during a break between strings.
The rifle and ammunition are capable. Trust your fundamentals.
She looked at him with surprise.
Easy for you to say.
You're shooting like you've been doing this for years.
I'm shooting like I learned to hunt. Same principles, just more precise application.
Jennifer's next string improved dramatically, her group tightening to acceptable standards. She gave Marcus a grateful nod. At 1,000 yards, only 16 candidates remained.
The distance pushed equipment and shooters to their limits, requiring perfect technique and deep understanding of external ballistics.
Marcus had never imagined attempting such a shot. The target appeared impossibly small even through the powerful scope, and wind conditions could send bullets feet off target. He spent 10 minutes studying conditions and calculating holdovers before taking his first shot. The bullet struck low and left, missing the target entirely. He made substantial corrections and tried again, this time hitting the target's backing but outside the scoring rings. His third shot struck the outer ring, confirming his calculations were improving. By the end of the 1,000-yard test, Marcus had achieved a respectable average, though several candidates with extensive military sniper experience outperformed him significantly. More importantly, he demonstrated the ability to learn and adapt rapidly under pressure. The teaching demonstration took place on day 3, with each remaining candidate assigned a volunteer student and required to provide 45 minutes of marksmanship instruction. The evaluators would judge not only the effectiveness of instruction but also safety protocols, communication skills, and ability to diagnose and correct errors. Marcus drew a 60-year-old retired accountant named Bob Peterson who claimed minimal shooting experience beyond occasionally firing his grandfather's shotgun as a teenager. Peterson was exactly the type of student Marcus might encounter as an instructor, enthusiastic but completely untrained. "First thing we need to discuss is safety," Marcus began, feeling more confident as he settled into the teaching role. "These 4 rules govern everything we do with firearms." He explained each safety rule with practical examples, ensuring Peterson understood not just the rules but the reasoning behind them. His approach was methodical and patient, drawing on his father's teaching style from childhood hunting trips. Now, before we even think about accuracy, we need to establish consistent fundamentals, Marcus continued, positioning Peterson at the rifle. Every shot should look and feel exactly the same.
If we can achieve consistency, accuracy follows naturally.
Marcus broke down the shooting process into discrete components: stance, grip, sight alignment, breathing, and trigger control. He demonstrated each element separately, then helped Peterson integrate them into a complete firing sequence. "Don't worry about hitting the target yet," Marcus instructed as Peterson prepared for his first shot.
Focus entirely on executing perfect fundamentals.
Where the bullet goes is just information. Peterson's first shot missed the target completely, but Marcus had been watching technique rather than results.
"Excellent trigger control," he praised.
"I saw you follow through properly.
Let's adjust your sight alignment slightly."
Over the next 30 minutes, Marcus guided Peterson through a systematic improvement process. Each shot provided data for refinement, and Marcus demonstrated remarkable ability to diagnose problems and suggest corrections. By the session's end, Peterson was consistently hitting the target and beaming with pride at his progress. "I never thought I could learn to shoot like this," Peterson said as they concluded. "You made it seem logical instead of mysterious." Watching from nearby, Sarah Martinez took detailed notes on Marcus's performance. His teaching style was natural and effective, breaking complex skills into manageable components while maintaining focus on safety and fundamentals.
The final evaluation phase included one-on-one interviews with the remaining candidates.
Marcus sat across from Martinez and 2 other evaluators, acutely aware that his future hung in the balance of this conversation. "Your shooting performance has been exceptional," Martinez began, "especially considering your limited formal training.
But I'm more impressed by your teaching demonstration.
You have a gift for making complex concepts accessible."
"Thank you, ma'am."
"However, you lack the depth of experience that most of our instructors possess."
"How would you handle teaching advanced techniques that you've never personally applied?"
Marcus considered the question carefully. "I'd approach it the same way I approached shooting at distances beyond my experience. Study the theory, practice under supervision, and always acknowledge the limits of my knowledge. A good instructor knows when to refer students to more experienced teachers."
"What's your long-term goal in this field?"
"To become the best instructor I can be while contributing meaningfully to training the people who protect our country. My military service was cut short, but this program offers another way to serve." The evaluators exchanged glances before Martinez continued. "We'll notify all candidates of our decisions within 48 hours.
Thank you for your participation."
Walking to his car, Marcus felt a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. He'd given his best effort across 3 demanding days, but the competition had been fierce. Former military snipers and accomplished competitive shooters possessed advantages he couldn't match in experience or credentials.
Jennifer Walsh caught up with him in the parking lot. "How do you think you did?"
"Hard to say. I felt good about the teaching portion, but there's so much experience in that group."
"Experience isn't everything."
"I watched your demonstration, and that guy Bob learned more in 45 minutes than some people learn in months of instruction."
"That's a gift." Marcus hoped she was right. The program represented more than just career opportunity, it was his chance to transform an injury-ended dream into a different form of service.
That evening, he called his father to process the experience.
"Sounds like you represented yourself well," his dad said. "Whatever happens, you prove something important to yourself." "What's that?"
"That setbacks don't define your limits. They just redirect your path." Marcus fell asleep that night knowing he'd done everything possible to succeed. The next 48 hours would determine whether his journey from mess hall worker to potential marksmanship instructor would continue, or whether he'd need to find another way to serve his country and make use of his unexpected talents.
The phone call that would change everything was less than 2 days away.
Marcus stared at his phone for the 4th time in 10 minutes, checking for missed calls or messages. 46 hours had passed since the evaluation ended, and Sarah Martinez had promised results within 48 hours.
The wait was becoming unbearable.
Every minute that ticked by felt like confirmation that his application had been rejected.
The mess hall shift dragged endlessly that Friday afternoon.
Marcus went through the motions of wiping tables and serving food, but his mind remained fixated on possibilities and fears. Betty Morrison noticed his distraction and, finally, pulled him aside during the dinner rush. "Son, you're about as useful as a screen door on a submarine today," she said with characteristic bluntness.
"Whatever you're waiting to hear about, fretting won't change the outcome." "I know. I just can't help thinking about all the things I could have done better during the assessment."
"That's natural. But you did your best with what you had."
"Sometimes that's enough, sometimes it isn't. Either way, you proved something important to yourself."
Marcus's phone rang at 6:47 p.m., just as he was finishing his closing duties. The caller ID showed Sarah Martinez's number, and his heart hammered against his ribs as he answered.
"Marcus Thompson." "Marcus, this is Sarah Martinez. Do you have a few minutes to talk?"
Her tone was neutral, professional, giving no hint of the news she carried. Marcus found a quiet corner of the mess hall and tried to keep his voice steady.
"Yes, ma'am. I have time.
First, I want you to know that this was one of the most competitive selection processes we've conducted.
The caliber of candidates was exceptional across the board." Marcus's heart sank.
This sounded like the beginning of a rejection speech. However, Martinez continued, your performance stood out in several critical areas. Your shooting demonstrated remarkable natural ability and rapid adaptation.
More importantly, your teaching demonstration showed genuine talent for instruction. The evaluators were unanimous in their recommendation. Marcus felt dizzy with relief and anticipation. Unanimous recommendation for what? Welcome to the Advanced Tactical Training Systems Marksmanship Instructor Program, Marcus.
You've been selected for our next training cycle, which begins Monday, February 1st. The words hit him like a physical blow.
He'd done it.
Against all odds, competing against former military snipers and experienced instructors, he'd earned his place in the program.
"Thank you," he managed. "Thank you so much. I won't let you down. I know you won't."
Lieutenant Commander Sullivan's endorsement carried significant weight, but your performance spoke for itself. Report to the Virginia Beach facility at 0800 Monday morning. You'll receive your schedule and materials then. After ending the call, Marcus sat in the empty mess hall, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. 3 weeks earlier, he'd been wiping tables and believing his military dreams were permanently ended. Now he was beginning a new career path that could lead to meaningful service in ways he'd never imagined. He called Sullivan immediately with the news. "Outstanding," Sullivan said, and Marcus could hear genuine pride in his voice.
"I knew you had it in you. This is just the beginning, though.
The real work starts Monday."
"I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. If you hadn't noticed me in the mess hall..."
"Son, I noticed your potential, but you did the work. You earned this selection through your own abilities and effort."
"Don't forget that."
Marcus's father was even more emotional when he heard the news. "I'm so proud of you," his dad said, his voice thick with feeling. "Your mother would have been thrilled to see how you've turned things around. I keep thinking about those hunting trips when I was a kid. All those lessons about patience and fundamentals. You were preparing me for this without either of us knowing it.
Maybe that's how life works sometimes. The lessons we need come disguised as something else entirely."
The following Monday, Marcus arrived at the Advanced Tactical Training Systems facility to begin the most intensive educational experience of his life. The 6-month program covered every aspect of marksmanship instruction, from basic safety protocols to advanced ballistics theory, from classroom management to range supervision. His fellow students included Jennifer Walsh, who'd also been selected, along with 10 others from diverse backgrounds. Former military personnel comprised half the group, but civilian competitors and law enforcement marksmen filled out the roster. Marcus quickly realized that natural ability had earned him a place, but comprehensive knowledge would be required for success.
The academic workload was staggering.
Students studied external ballistics, terminal ballistics, meteorology, physics, anatomy, psychology of instruction, and dozens of related subjects. Marcus found himself spending 12 to 14 hours daily either in classroom sessions or private study, pushing his mind to absorb information at an unprecedented rate. "This is like drinking from a fire hose," Jennifer complained during their third week, surrounded by textbooks and technical manuals in the facility's library.
Marcus nodded agreement while reviewing ballistics calculations.
"But it's incredible how everything connects. Understanding the physics makes the practical applications make sense." Their first practical teaching assignment came in week 4. Each student was assigned actual military personnel from nearby bases who needed marksmanship remediation.
Marcus drew a young Marine named Private Torres who'd been struggling with basic rifle qualification despite multiple attempts.
"I just can't hit anything beyond 200 yards, Torres admitted during their first session.
"My drill instructors are losing patience with me."
Marcus spent an hour observing Torres's shooting technique, noting multiple fundamental errors that had gone uncorrected through previous instruction. The Marine's stance was inconsistent, his grip was incorrect, and his trigger control showed significant problems.
"We're going to start from the absolute beginning," Marcus announced. "Forget everything you think you know about shooting. We're building new habits from the ground up."
Over 6 weeks of twice-weekly sessions, Marcus systematically corrected Torres's technique. He drew on his academic knowledge to explain the scientific principles behind each fundamental, helping Torres understand why proper technique mattered rather than simply memorizing procedures. "I never understood the why before," Torres said during their final session, after qualifying expert for the first time in his military career.
"Previous instructors just told me what to do.
You helped me understand how it all works together."
Marcus felt a satisfaction deeper than any personal achievement he'd experienced.
Helping Torres succeed provided confirmation that his career change was about more than personal fulfillment, it was about contributing to something larger than himself.
The advanced phases of the program pushed students into specialized areas of expertise.
Marcus gravitated toward long-range precision shooting, building on his natural abilities with comprehensive theoretical knowledge. He studied advanced ballistics software, learned to read environmental conditions with scientific precision, and mastered equipment that cost more than luxury automobiles. During week 16, the program brought in Lieutenant Commander Sullivan for a guest lecture on military applications of precision marksmanship. After his presentation, Sullivan approached Marcus privately.
"How are you finding the program?" "Challenging but incredible. I'm learning things I never knew existed."
"Your instructors speak highly of your progress. They say you have a gift for making complex concepts accessible to struggling students."
Marcus felt pleased by the feedback. "It's rewarding work.
These young service members deserve the best instruction we can provide."
Sullivan nodded approvingly. "That's the right attitude. I wanted to mention something else.
There's a position opening up at our base for a civilian marksmanship instructor.
Contract position, working directly with SEAL candidates who need additional training. Interested?" The offer represented everything Marcus had hoped for when he began this journey.
Working with SEAL candidates would mean contributing to the training of America's most elite warriors, using skills he developed from an unexpected foundation of natural talent and intensive education. "Very interested," Marcus replied without hesitation.
"Finish your program first. The position will be available when you graduate."
The final weeks of the instructor program included comprehensive examinations, teaching evaluations, and certification processes. Marcus had evolved from a mess hall worker with raw talent into a knowledgeable professional capable of training others in complex technical skills. His graduation project involved developing a complete curriculum for remedial marksmanship instruction, drawing on his experiences with students like Private Torres. The project demonstrated his ability to synthesize academic knowledge with practical application, creating teaching materials that other instructors could use effectively. Sarah Martinez delivered the graduation address to Marcus's class, reflecting on their journey from diverse backgrounds to certified professionals. 6 months ago, you came here with various levels of shooting ability but limited understanding of how to transfer that knowledge to others, she said. Today, you're equipped to train the men and women who defend our nation.
That's a responsibility we don't take lightly.
Marcus received his certification with a mixture of pride and anticipation for what lay ahead. The young man who'd believed his service dreams were ended by a knee injury had discovered a different path to meaningful contribution. 3 days later, he reported to the naval base where his journey had begun, this time as a certified marksmanship instructor rather than a mess hall worker. Betty Morrison had thrown him a farewell party, expressing genuine pride in his transformation while joking about losing her best dishwasher. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan met Marcus at the base gate, driving him to the new instructor facility that would be his workplace. "Full circle," Sullivan observed as they passed the mess hall where they'd first met. "Not quite full circle," Marcus corrected.
"More like the beginning of a new spiral."
"Same place, completely different purpose."
The civilian instructor position exceeded Marcus's expectations.
He worked with SEAL candidates who struggled with precision shooting, helping them achieve the standards necessary for graduation. Each successful student represented lives that might be saved by superior marksmanship skills in combat situations. His reputation grew quickly within the special operations community. Marcus's ability to diagnose shooting problems and develop corrective strategies became legendary among instructors and students alike. His teaching style, combining technical knowledge with intuitive understanding of natural shooting mechanics, produced consistently excellent results.
"Thompson's got the magic touch," one SEAL instructor told another after Marcus helped a struggling candidate achieve expert qualification. "He can fix shooting problems other instructors can't even identify."
6 months into his new position, Marcus received a call that brought his journey full circle in an unexpected way. Sarah Martinez was on the line with an unusual request.
"Marcus, I need a favor.
We have a candidate for our instructor program who reminds me of someone I used to know. Young man, natural ability, limited formal training, but tremendous potential.
Would you be willing to mentor him through the selection process?"
Marcus smiled, remembering his own nervousness before the assessment that had changed his life.
"What's his background?" "Navy seaman, working in food service."
Lieutenant Commander Sullivan discovered him and thinks he has exceptional potential.
The symmetry was perfect.
Marcus had been given an opportunity by someone who recognized his potential, and now he could provide the same guidance to another young person with similar dreams. "I'd be honored to help," Marcus replied.
"When do we start?"
That afternoon, Marcus found himself back at the base firing range where his own transformation had begun. The young seaman waiting for him looked nervous and eager, carrying himself with the same mixture of hope and uncertainty Marcus remembered feeling. "Marcus Thompson," he said, extending his hand. "I hear you're interested in marksmanship instruction." The young man's face lit up with recognition.
"Sir, you're the instructor everyone talks about."
"The one who went from mess hall to SEAL trainer." Marcus chuckled at the description.
"Something like that. What's your name?" "Petty Officer 2nd Class David Chen, sir. And I think I'd like to follow in your footsteps."
As Marcus began evaluating Chen's shooting ability, he reflected on the unpredictable path that had brought him to this moment. A knee injury that had seemed like the end of his dreams had actually been the beginning of discovering his true calling.
Sometimes setbacks weren't endings but redirections toward purposes that couldn't be seen from the starting point.
The rifle cracked as Chen fired his first shot, striking the target with promising accuracy. Marcus smiled, remembering the advice Sullivan had given him months earlier: natural talent combined with determination beats experience without passion every time. Looking at Chen's eager face, Marcus knew he was witnessing the beginning of another transformation story. His own journey from mess hall to marksman had become complete not with his personal success, but with his ability to guide others along similar paths. The SEALs had been right when they said his story was unforgettable. Not because of any single dramatic moment, but because it demonstrated that potential could be discovered in the most unexpected places, nurtured through dedicated effort, and ultimately shared to multiply its impact far beyond any individual achievement. Standing on the range where his new life had begun, Marcus felt deep satisfaction knowing his injury had led not to the end of his service dreams, but to their most meaningful expression. Sometimes the best stories weren't about overcoming obstacles, but about discovering that obstacles could become doorways to purposes never previously imagined.